So this is called Early Stages. The ferns look happy, healthy and green in the damp gloom. The birches have grown strong stems to rise to the light above the roofs. They must have craved nurture at the start, and those acanthus will have needed protection from the bully boy slugs till they got their footing. Now they're established, fending for themselves. Some input in the early years is all it takes, till a root structure is in place, enough to secure the nourishment surely there. No one would uproot plants, turf them out of a pot they've filled all their lives, and expect them to survive alone in open ground. These have settled in. They have found the light, those that seek it, the others their shady corner. Okay. And now sorry, just looking for who's next. Jack Houston, I've got next. Jack is a librarian when he's not a poet. He was a runner-up in the Basil Bunting Prize, running Newcastle by Newcastle University, and also runner-up in the BBC short story competition recently, and writes wonderful, very direct, strange, yet very straightforward poems. Let's hear one.
Hello everyone. Of course, I can't hear you because you're all muted, but I'll read this poem to you anyway. It's got my new table. My new table is large, so large I can't quite see over it. One expects tables to be about hip height, easy to rest a mug on, or sit at to undertake an activity such as eating, or drawing, or resting elbows to make a sling with the palms, face held towards a convenient window. This table can be walked under with only the slightest stoop. The wide space between its legs easily swept. Easy to bring the 4 chairs, which are also large, one for each side, close, to hide underneath in what I have found to be a remarkably comfortable place. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. I will now introduce Ingrid Leonard, who's one of 2 of us who've now embarked on a PhD in creative writing at Aberdeen University, also published in a range of magazines. I really enjoyed a poem she had recently, which was shortlisted 3rd place in the Ver Poets competition. So here's Ingrid Leonard.
Thanks very much, Steph, and huge congratulations on tonight's launch. And my copy of your pamphlet has arrived in Lithuania, and I've been reading it this morning and really enjoying your poems. So great, well done. And thank you very much for inviting me to read a poem here tonight. This is Whole of Row. I am lost, and the white waves curdle below a knotless horizon. The studio is warm, dew-lit. I see clearly without glasses how distance assists, yet the glands of my gut betray me. At pit, I'm a liver-grey sea. Mornings, you slide an arm under my breast and whisper. I exalt you to classmates over breakfast, the better to purge your image. When my father died, baby sparrows bobbed in the garden, tried to take flight. October sea spills through the whole arow, froths into the bay. The cold air brings in a rush of the aurora, a few stars. How will I pilot winter's upturn? Thank you.
Thanks, Ingrid. Okay, and next up we have Sandra Galton. And the most important thing to say about Sandra at this point, she's a great poet, is that she has a pamphlet out of her own, which you can buy, with Green Bottle Press. It's called Shadow Selves. Shadow Selves. So I read that. That's excellent pamphlet. So here's Sandra Galton.
Thank you, Steph, and thank you also very much for inviting me to read tonight. And I also have your lovely book and have been enjoying reading your poems. I'm going to read the first poem in my pamphlet, which is called Shadow on the Wall. And it has an epigraph by Nietzsche, which is, to become wise, you must learn to listen to the wild dogs barking in your cellar. There's a dog down in the cellar, dog tired, stopped as a burnt-out log, paws awry, like scrapped faggots, ears flattened, damped. This is no way to keep him. No quickening comes from the muzzle, blue as dusk, tapering to cross-hatched snout. The night is long, he's done with whimpering, so still he might be flatlining. But wait, there's spark in him yet. His small rose ears twitch back, give him a moment to catch his breath, see him shimmer into life. Now he is upright, front legs ramrod straight, hind quarters mirrored question marks, a spring unleashed. Now we see his kind, matchless oomph. Give him air. Pacing wall to corner, wall to corner, wall to door, he is yours. Open that door. Watch him turn and twist and burst, a blur, shameless in the naked light. See how he scorches. Keep up. He's yours. Extend your hand to touch him. He burns, but does not bite.
Thanks, Sandra. Yeah, I really like that poem. Okay, it's back to me. So this poem has a different impact. It's the first poem in the pamphlet. It has a different impact. Yeah, I'm not doing the thing where I tell you the page number, but it's a smallish book and it's got a contents. So it's the I can see Ingrid is. It has it basically has a different impact if you're not arriving at a Zoom meeting. You have to imagine me arriving at a reading, peeling off my reflective jacket, perhaps loosening my cycling shoes, taking off several layers, undoubtedly, panting, sweating slightly, and then getting up to read. On arrival, I'll rock up one day to a do like this dead. Perfect on my way here anecdote. Car cut me up on the old Kent road. Knocked me sideways flat. Bike bashed bent. Worse than me to see. Saved, sprayed white. Locked to railings where friends then left flowers, fluffy toys and poems. My family deciding to scatter my ashes round roses, white tinged red, here each year after, crying at the good the potash would do. Unlike my poor bike, I kept my shape. Last thing I remember, the driver defensive as I gazed along ground you shouldn't lie on, grey, grim, at my yellow bag. Reached a raw arm in to note the number plate. Inches from my face, cross about the time I'd waited in hospital. Worrying who would do my work. Deciding it was worse, who would bin my things. After that, I couldn't see or hear, a relief from shouting and sirens, and, well, here I am. Sorry about that slightly sobering beginning, but it's in the pamphlet, which I'm here to represent. So next we have, yes, I should say I really like autumn. This has not been the best summer, let's face it. Normally I'm a summer person, but I do really like autumn. This poem, however, is about spring. Finally, you breeze in with a few daffs and the promise things will be better. Suddenly flaunt a milder side, release brief Brief warmth, watch me uncurl from cold hurt, still vulnerable. Then you snatch it back behind the next cloud in a cold snap. Now dangle hope again. Is that supposed to make up for keeping me in the dark for months on freeze, putting me down, locking me away, going south for a laugh? March was the end. As for April, too many flowers now, too late. What else have we got? Oh yeah. Lockdown, or the coronavirus in general, has not only killed off real life poetry readings and cultural events, it's all kinds of sort of boozy schmoozing work-related do's. It began at the beginning of the year with me for, the London Book Fair was cancelled, and I'm sure Frankfurt even took place this year. Indeed, one person's here. I think I was at Frankfurt with last year. So this poem's also about playing with children, and a lot of that has gone on, however. So, red and green make. Have you actually tried dividing business from pleasure? One email for each, Sunday sacred, computer off, phone silent, no more than 2 drinks with colleagues, no details, definitely no flirting, and never one of the last 2 left in the pub at a conference. Have you actually tried giving children a rainbow of fresh plasticine, suggesting they make the things each stripe implies? Green leaves, red tomato, yellow banana, blue eyes, leaving them to answer the phone, check mail, expecting the colours to stay in pure balls, ready to play with again, as their spectrum broadens. Green envy, red tie, yellow brick road, blue bruise, but returning to find them on crayons now, leaving behind what looks like one big lump of brown poo, striated on inspection with every fluid hue possible, entwined and mingled deep inside each other, no combination off limits, inseparable and irreversible, compromised and unworkable. So I'm not sure how long that I meant to time my little sections. Thanks for that. We'll have one more, and then back to my peers. So, smudged. This is another one about my least favourite road in London, which was alluded to in an earlier poem. I altered the description of it ever so slightly for the reading. Smudged, a hazard I swerve around, rich brown, raspberry red and nastier, split against the filth of the A2, an ex-fox. Next time I know to avoid it. A hump, contoured, drained of colour, merging at the pace of London, where death is average, to conform with the asphalt. Flatter each day, squeegeed into Kent, rolled like newsprint, up the West End and down every shitty oily street between. There have been times I've forgotten to look out, ridden over the spot, spread it on my narrow tyres. It will be smudged on the hallway floor, where my bike rests, on all my floors, my room where I lie flat. Now I look for traces of it on the road, see none, see it everywhere. Okay, that's enough for me from now. Let's have Mary Powell. Mary has a really original voice, I think, as a poet, and it's a fellow South Londoner, originally from Ireland. So let's hear what she's brought.
Hi, Steph. Congratulations again on your pamphlet. Very proud of you and delighted to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to read a poem. This is one that was read on the MA in the early days, and it's a tribute to Elizabeth Bishop. Dear Elizabeth, I read of that tremendous catch. It might have made a difference, but our histories pattern us. I'm in a house that sleeps in the sea, His ghost woke me in the night. My narrow bed shook for hours. What was it like to not know him or the woman they put away? I wonder how that would be for me. A bat has entered the room. It is frantic. I'm concerned. It's going mad in the lampshade. Mrs. Skinner arranged all the flowers on thin plinths. They rose up from the centre of each table. She thought of everything. You cannot see her face, though, for iridescences catch the light and blind us. How I admire your words and the way you manage them. The ones you left out were startling. This room swims and swelters. You wrote most devastatingly in the heat. That bat isn't moving anymore. I need to go. P.S. I may have amputated a fin or a wing and will not send this after all. Thank you for listening. Can't hear you, Steph.
I think you're muted, Steph.
Oops. Steph?
Sorry, I'm muted. I think I clicked, sorry, I clicked twice. Jeremy Langrish has performed in a variety of places. I discovered, including the South Bank Centre. He sent me such a, aside from his biographical details, he sent me such a wonderfully poetic statement. I'm going to read it, on talking about words. They make up the little enduring objects we call poems on a page for eyes, and strive to liberate themselves in a flash of sound for ears. I thought that was so good. Jeremy, read us a poem.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here. I've got a poem that seems on our second and third side to be a bit lockdowny. So let's see how it goes. It's called The Cost of Kibble. You ask me what it is about claw scratch, paw print on the lights of the garden door. I'm wondering about the cat on the fence, if it's the thrill of the chase, innate viciousness, exertion to dominance, or the images of red, quivering, raw meat. You ask me what it is about the snoring under the bed in the middle of the night. I dream of the walk in the park, past the turd at the corner, same colour, same smell, different shape, different day. Before the rattle of kibble and cornflake slurps, when you all bicker about now and then before you leave to do your days. Yes, perhaps it's my pedigree, or the early nurturing when I yawn, stretch, shake my head, flop my tail, looking for other comfort, other dreams. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. That's great. Steve Kendall is up next. A great storyteller, lyrical storyteller, I was there. Organizer of the Ooze Muse Nights, I think in Bedfordshire or Hertfordshire, where he lives. Perhaps the river flows through both. He's also just started a PhD at Newcastle, our alma mater, as it were. Yeah, let's see if I start a PhD at any point in the next few years. Steve Kendall. Steve, you're muted.
Right. What
Yeah.
I said was, thank you very much, Steph. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having us, and congratulations on the pamphlet. And sorry for failing to unmute myself, although I didn't say that. I was told this afternoon about an online theatre performance where the audience were all asked to hold an ice cube during the performance as a way of kind of giving them a united common experience throughout the performance. I'm not going to ask you to do that, but I'm going to ask you to imagine sunflowers, because this poem is called Sunflowers. It is difficult to write about sunflowers without summoning the ones in the field next to the house we came to the day after that row so fierce it broke us for a while. We drove all day in a black hatchback, jumping the lights by mistake, tired out, shuffling behind the traffic, swallowing apologies and spit, arguing over the map. The child in the rearview mirror woke as we turned her head, sweaty with sleep, listening to the gravel give as we hauled to a halt under the one tree. Sunflowers watched us over the wall as we unpacked in the last of the light. In the morning, the child made a place for the horses and dogs in the armoire. Your face had been eaten in the night. I was okay, except for 1 or 2 fingers. We made coffee, drank it outside, silent, under the sunflower's incurious gaze.
Thank you, Steve. Great. Yeah. You read very clearly as well.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if I achieved that. Okay, this chirpy number is called Progress. And I'm quite a page poet more than a stage poet, let's be fair. So I sometimes feel it's a bit, and what you actually miss in the sense of the reading is the visual aspect of poems. I do, to varying degrees, spend quite a lot of time arranging my poems on the page. So this one has a sort of, for those of you who don't have the book yet, this poem sort of goes out steadily and then comes back in again. It's been described as a snowball poem. I think that's a thing. Progress. First they let us live, then they let us do their jobs, then they let us live in their cities, then they let us live in their countryside, then they let us participate in their ceremonies, then they let us join their splendid army and police, then they let us feature in their advertising campaigns, then they let us direct their campaigns and plan their strategies, then they came for the weirdos and outsiders and extremists who were left, who kept speaking out, refused to conform and clearly deserved it, and there were plenty of us to help eliminate them. How are we doing? I thought I'd read another distinctly dystopian poem. There's a bit of a strand. There aren't any more poems about death, you'll be pleased to hear that. And there are some more about gardening coming, but I'll just read this other slightly dystopian one because Nay and I were talking about it earlier, that we might discuss it. It's a prose poem and it's kind of a dramatic monologue essentially, in the voice of someone who is not me. I do not have acting skills, but I shall do my best. What to take on flight? Chloe, not your platforms. Put your trainers on. No, don't put the platforms in your bag. No, we can only take 1 pair of shoes each, and not that bag, the rucksack. I don't care if it doesn't go with your jacket. It's an Ortlieb. It's stronger. I may need you to carry Archie, darling. All that netball. You'll be fine. Yes, your phone's a good idea, and the charger. Well, we don't know where it will work and when, but Chloe, obviously it would be nice to drive, but Daddy has checked. He's been listening to the radio, watching the news, well, there is only news, and the net. The queues are too long. It'd be dangerous stranded in a car. This way we get out quicker. Sweetie, there is no chance of getting on a plane. I was terribly lucky to get these train tickets. Don't ask. Darling, I don't know exactly where we're going. Spain first, South America if we can. Darling, you're the one with the most Spanish, all those verbs you learned. I don't know what will happen to the rest of your clothes or your gadgets. Darling, Grandma has decided she's staying here. She feels she's too old for journeys and she'll just see what happens. Oh, don't cry, darling. There, I need you to be strong. We all need to be strong. Andrew, what's the latest? Where's the fighting got to? Andrew, turn it down for a second. Andrew, talk to me. Okay, I shall attempt to lighten the mood with a poem called You, which has a kind of horticultural theme. So, hello to anyone. This is very much not a southeast of England poem, for reasons that will become clear to anyone who knows about gardening. So, hello to my friends and family in the Midlands, perhaps in rural Shropshire, I don't know. Should anyone be there? Or anywhere further north in this country? I think most of you are in the southeast, but we have Ireland represented. Yeah, we have Rosemary Antrobus. I should think she would know a lot about gardening. I'm not sure. I don't know who Rosemary Antrobus is. You. I never got us sisters through the winter. Our heavy soil, soggy sky, they like it light and dry. Year on year, snow melt left salvia and rosemary dead. Fatsias blackened, brassicas rotten in bitter rain. Camellias burnt in the first sun. I tried to see my garden through, to anticipate cold shocks, cosseting with fleece, cloches, mulch, considering drainage and frost pockets. But by February left it, beaten down. Talk of a year-round succession of leaves and flowers, lamb's lettuce, hellebore, escaped me. Other people's luck. I emerged late spring to start from scratch, re-sow. I never got a relationship through the winter. Sap retreated back to my stem. Foliage dropped from me, left a dark frame, inert in the brief low light as the temperature fell to freezing. Flattened under storms of impatience, blizzards of mismatched expectation, I flew south, returned to find myself supplanted by a more vigorous specimen. Yet this winter, I have kept a succession of fresh affection alive, kisses flowering through the dark afternoons. It's not that my cultivation has improved, it's you. I'll just finish off with another thoroughly horticultural one. Clematis has the last laugh. Finding light is a race to the top. Height helps, and best keep thin. As a climber, I know that. Mock the jostling trees as they compete. I breach discrete species, linking individualist limbs, like it or not, forcing upwardly mobile birches and stolid beeches to join hands like a loved-up party guest, weaving my way through the boughs, flirting and stirring it unchecked, leaving trouble behind, and rising above to lounge on the canopy and open my flowers in broad daylight. Thank you. Nadia is in charge of the next bit.
That's so great, Steph. Thanks so much. So yeah, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and then we'll see if anyone else wants to ask you questions. I would like to start with the cover. I just adore this cover so much, and I feel it sums up the pamphlet so well. You know, the title is so clear in its meaning. And it's in a huge clear sign on the cover, and you've got, and then this is a collage, isn't it? But then you've got edibles, and then you've got like ground elder, you've got the unwanted, you've got exotic immigrants in there, handcrafted plants, and then like behind the sign, it looks very much like the traditional British countryside. Also, I love that you used the, is it called the dymo? The thing with your that you know, anybody our age probably had one of these that you do your name and you stick it on everything to say it's yours when you're a child. So for me, this cover is absolutely genius because it shows exactly what the whole pamphlet is about inside. So having gushed, I'd like you to say something about the cover.
Yeah, I guess I did it quite quickly. I didn't have to think that hard about it. On the other hand, as the material had been percolating through my head, some of these poems go back a while. In that sense, it was all there. I think all I can say is it's not exactly the first collage I've made. I do make a lot of collages, and I'm hoping to get back to that in a bit more of a big way. And the collage principle, I suppose, is, so you talked about the diversity, the different kinds of ways of plants and the different kinds of ways of representing plants. The collage principle of bringing things together that might be seen to be disparate and juxtaposing them is, yeah, it's been something that accompanied me for years. You know, I was a fan of the German collage artists from the early 20th century, for instance. Yeah, I just love combining things rather than just stripping them down and separating.
So when you were making it, it was much more a subconscious thing, that it all just came together. You weren't thinking about which plants you were putting there, or were you?
I suppose I was thinking about the range. Yeah, the diversity.
Yeah.
Contrast. Yeah, I suppose in that sense. Yeah.
So then I want to ask you, how much, these are going to be difficult questions, I'll warn you already. How much does visual art influence your poetry writing, do you think?
Well, that's a tricky one. Because a bit. I was immersed in it for years. Not everyone may know, when I left school, I went on to study visual art, and that was my main occupation. But I was always literary. I always read books and wrote a little bit myself. So it's increasingly part of the poetry, yes. So I try and think about, as I said earlier, what it looks like. And I mean, I'm aware my poetry is by no means, you described it earlier as accessible. My poetry is by no means the most experimental at all. I like to experiment, but I tend to then come back to actually release something, to actually, from handing something over to someone to read, I like to feel the experimental phase is over with and they can actually get a hook on it, if you see what I mean. So, you know, I went to Goldsmiths, which was described as the Hochberg of conceptual art. Yeah, but so I can engage with extremely avant-garde visual art practice, but yeah. And I hope that helps. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And probably most people here know that you're also a professional translator. You translate very, very like best-selling German novels and other things like that. Yes. Do you think the translation influences your poetry?
Yeah, that's certainly, because my first creative writing efforts were all prose. I've always read poetry, but then I spent a long time trying to write. I've got 2 shelved novels behind me and a variety of short prose. And then I shifted to poetry, and yeah, and I'd been translating poetry before I started writing it. So I had long been occasionally picking up a German poem and having a go at translating it, then sending it to a magazine, stuff like that. So I'd been looking at poetry and thinking, and I think I always knew I was going to write poetry. And yeah, and I think there's nothing like translation, where you basically take apart a piece of text. You really have to work, poetry or prose, you really have to work out what it's doing, how it's doing it, and how you're going to make it do the same thing in English. So there's nothing like that for engaging with yeah, how writing's actually done. And there's a range of different, and obviously poetry cultures in different countries vary as well. So I found I found some poetry in German poetry that's possibly closer to what I feel is my kind of work, my kind of poetry as well. Yeah. So,
And what is your? Do you have a process of writing a poem, or do they really vary? I mean, does it all happen in your head and then it comes down, or does the title come first, or?
The title rarely comes first. I sometimes find the process quite painful, to be honest. I like it when I've got a fairly good idea and I can start writing it, but even then, sometimes that doesn't work. I sort of like to have an idea. I don't really do free writing where I then work out later what it's about. I tend to but what it's about shifts, of course. And I like the stage where I prefer the stage once I've started, where I've got something that's vaguely got some kind of form that I can hack into and change and add bits, and it's got an identity of its own. I can see what kind of form it's going to take as a poem and what the general thrust is. I hate the bit before that happens. So I'm getting better at that.
Some of the poems, as we know, are in the pamphlet are about growing up and being different to other kids. Can you talk about that a bit?
I shall attempt to. It felt like something worth representing, I suppose, really. That's all. And what helped me was the gardening metaphors. It was doing the Mixed Borders projects where I first actually wrote about my initial poetry attempts. Yeah, were like substandard charade. They're quite kind of confessional stuff about my past and my woes. And once I brought plants in to add an extra layer, that really helped. So yeah, and about being different, I don't know really. Yeah, I was an artist. That was in the 1980s. It wasn't hard to be different from everyone else, to be honest. So, some people here will remember. And this country has changed so much. I actually went and lived in Berlin during the period when, for me, this country became, if you ask me, a whole lot more liberal. In terms of how people can behave. Of course, we know it's in other ways it's become more xenophobic, and economic differences have become more acute. But if you compare with the way I grew up and the way this country is like now, I had to go to the liberal metropolis of Berlin for over a decade and come back. I don't know if that helps. I don't know what else to say about the poem, really, but
no, that's great.
Yeah, I think I'd say to anyone, add extra layers and metaphors. That's what helped me sort of get into talking about myself, but also away from it and into other directions. Yeah.
And you mentioned that I wanted to talk about the What to Take on Flight poem. So obviously the whole pamphlet was written pre-COVID, but that poem is sort of what I always thought an apocalypse would be like. A lot of action. I guess Tom Cruise would be around the corner, and thinking of War of the Worlds. Lots of running and screaming, and but it turned out that we were just sitting at home quietly. So I was just wondering why you wrote that poem, and what brought that out of you.
Yeah, there's a initial simple answer to that, which is it was 2015. The war in Syria was when did it actually start? I can't remember. Anyway, it was massively in the news. There was a global refugee crisis throughout Europe. A group of poets headed by Jacqueline Saphra had organised a big poetry reading event for us all to raise money by reading all day. I'm not sure if anyone else here was involved in that. The Poemathon. to organise funds for the refugee crisis. You know, I wasn't an especially experienced poet at that point. Anyway, so I just thought I have to write about what would it be like if this happened to us here. So I wrote about quite a cosy, well-heeled, comfortable family who weren't expecting to have to leave all their possessions and leave the country in a hurry. That's all really. I just set myself out that task, and I didn't read it at the poemathon. I looked at it, I thought, oh, I don't think it's that good. I'm not sure if it's appropriate. I don't think I've done it right. Later, I looked at it again, worked on it, and submitted it for one of my MA assignments. Sent it to Rialto magazine, who published it. It's the only poem they've ever published of mine. So it had resonance, I guess. Yeah, and I think I should try that approach more often because it seemed to bring something out. It's quite interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And the red and green make. Tell me how that where that poem came from as well. I want to know about all of them, but those two were the ones that I particularly wanted to ask about. Where did that come from?
Yeah. Well, I'll reveal as much as I wish to poetry.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, most people know I don't regularly play with children with plasticine, but I have at least once in my life had that experience of literally handing children plasticine in a naive expectation we could use it again. And I remember our childhood plasticine also ending up looking like a brown lump of poo. Yeah. As for what can happen at a literary event, say, after you've been in the pub too long, yeah, I'm not saying any more. Yeah.
And everyone who's read tonight, that you all met at the poetry school, the inaugural or part of the inaugural cohort for the Newcastle University MA in writing poetry, which was 2017, wasn't it?
I actually forget, but someone here will know.
I think I took it from inside the pamphlet. I think I got that information from there. What can I ask you? What do you feel you gained from that experience, from doing the MA?
Yeah, as much as anything, tools for carrying on learning loads. I mean, I left it thinking, God, I need to learn a lot about poetry, but which I have continued to do and practice. In a sense, practice working on the feedback I was giving then, and I think it's actually now coming to fruition. You can do it. Some of my peers, some of my fellow cohort members, we approached it at different periods in life as well. I'd say to anyone considering doing something like that, you can either decide, as I did perhaps, that I'm going to learn quite a lot quite quickly, or you can do can spend years working on your poetry and reading about poetry and learning loads, and then do it, and as it were, as the summation of your, you would get a better grade at the end of it. And equally, you can decide. I mean, several of us were some of my colleagues were part-time or retired. Some of us were trying to work full-time or part-time the whole time. So someone said to me, "You put in as much as you get out as much as you put in." Yeah. So I learned an awful lot about how to actually put poems together and how other people put them together. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I think at this point I'd like to thank everybody for coming and listening. I'd particularly like to in a minute I'm going to ask Steph to read the last poem, but before I do that, so he can have the last word. But I'd just like to thank all of you for coming. For Steve Kendall, Mary Powell, Sandra Galton, Jeremy Langrish, Ingrid Leonard, Jack Houston, for being so generous with your time, with your poems, and making this such a lovely event. And thanks to Tom, who's in the background looking after everything. After Steph's poem, if you want to unmute yourselves, you're very welcome to. So thank you all so much. And Steph Morris, could you please read one more poem from Please Don't Trample Us, We're Trying to Grow? Whoop, you're looking down. Have you got one?
I'm looking at the book. Yeah. I'm looking through that.
Excellent. Thank you.
So I thought I'd read Keep Calm and Cross Off. I try and avoid introductory explanations or explanatory introductions, but it is worth saying that this one was written as one of those mixed borders residencies to be placed in the garden of the House of St Barnabas near Centre Point in Soho, and the planned infrastructure development Crossrail runs beneath the house. So if they damage the house, Crossrail has to give them a lot of money. So that was part of the background to this poem, I guess, and it was actually installed in their garden, so in a sense you were in the place, so that might affect the way you read it. Keep calm and cross off. Or keep calm and cross off. Once Crossrail has halved the smoke, bringing east and west to centre, top-down rail or up-yours rail, whatever rail, will quarter it south to north. Unfold that image, because then they'll want /rail, the diagonal from Richmond to Chigwell through Islington. They'll find it hard to resist completing the map to make a nationalist logo, and by this time flags and crowns will be the country's main export. So many lines through the centre, they fuse cool and clear, the few not riding through, alighting to drink when no one thought to pause. But resist they will. Margins must be maintained. Lines cannot be allowed to connect only, they must also divide. With the southeast corner torn from our image along the folds, or used for legends, adverts, beneath which you still live, /rail will slide from Harrow down through Hampstead to Centre Point, perhaps a little further to the river, but there it will stop. Right, thanks everyone. Thanks very much. A Southeast London howl. Yeah. So, yeah, I just better say once more, thanks again for coming. I think Tom's going to unmute, or you're going to unmute yourself. Okay. You've been invited to unmute yourself. Yeah, it's really lovely to see you. As I said, people from a variety of countries, a variety of places in this country. I think we have New York represented, if Michael's there, and still there, and definitely Berlin. Yeah, Ireland. The banner. Where's the banner?
Hey.
Oh, thanks, Rachel. Thank you, Rachel.
Congratulations, Steph. Congratulations. Well done.